quick side note, in this episode, I am again testing a new mic setup and a new soundboard. So if you do hear a lot of breathing and strange sound recording, I apologize. I'm still trying to get the kinks worked out. But yeah, thank you again for listening to the Black Bibliophile, and let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Black Bibliophile podcast. The Black Bibliophile is a podcast where I, Jazz, read and talk about popular and little-known books, comics, zines, and authors. To quote Haruki Murakami, "If you only read the books that everyone else is reading, you can only think what everyone else is thinking." And with that, let's start the show.
Welcome back to the Black Bibliophile. It's me, Jazz, your host. This week we're going back into comic books and graphic novels and talking a little bit about The Authority by Warren Ellis, Bryan Hitch, Paul Neary. I got this book, or started reading this book, as a recommendation from a friend. And I have some thoughts about Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the books. So let's just dive in and I'll read you a summary for Volume 1. After witnessing the demise of most of her Stormwatch teammates, Ginny Sparks wants to create a new superhero team dedicated to protecting Earth against threats of a global scale. Joined by former Stormwatch members Jack Hawksmoor and Shen Li Min, Ginny recruits 4 new members: the Doctor, the Engineer, Apollo, and the Midnighter, forming the ultra-powerful Authority. Collected in this edition are their 2 first missions: battling a nation of superpowered terrorists and stopping the invasion from a parallel world. So, like I said before, I got this book as a recommendation from a friend. He was telling me, we were talking about superhero teams, and he brought up The Authority because they literally do not give a flying fuck. Like, they will just do whatever. They're not like the Avengers. They're not like any superhero team where they're like, they believe in justice, but they believe in justice at any cost. So they will maim, murder, and kill until they get the justice they acquire, which I thought was really interesting because usually you don't read superhero comics that have superheroes that literally just kill their way to justice. They don't take anyone to jail. There is no jail here. It's all about, figuring out how to kill this person so we can get justice. And like, it's not like they go about murdering people indiscriminately. It's more like there is no second chance. Like, if they're not going to turn themselves over or stop what they're doing, then the Authority doesn't see the point in keeping them alive or trying to talk about how to keep them alive, which I found super interesting. So I was like, all right, I'll check this out. I'll read The Authority and see what's up. So, The Authority Volume 1 by Warren Ellis, Bryan Hitch, and Paul Neary kind of focuses again on Ginny Sparks getting the team back together after they were all brutally murdered, and her trying to patch the team back together and create a new superhero team. I'm going to talk a little bit about the art. So Bryan Hitch does the art, and I really, really enjoy it. It reminds me a lot of like the 90s kind of comics with the slick art, the great and intense setups for the team, and the huge battle scenes look epic as hell. I'm into Bryan Hitch's art on this volume. I'm into Warren Ellis's writing, even though Warren Ellis kind of, with the first setup, the first arc is about the team going against, I forget what they're called. They're called the Circle. And the Circle, low-key, their leader isn't low-key. It's like a racist stereotype of an Asian person. And not here for the long nails and the Fu Manchu mustache. And it's like it's a little bit much. And to get past that whole racist, stereotypical trope of a villain, you just gotta, I guess, I kind of had to overlook it to continue reading the book. But yeah, that was wild. So the leader of the circle basically wants to destroy the planet and bring down a reign of terror so he can own. So he's destroying 3 cities, and basically the circle has a symbol with 3 dots in it, and it's a circle. If you think of like, a ring with 3 dots on it, and each dot represents a city. So he's literally etching his symbol into the planet to show ownership of the earth. And with each city or each dot, he's destroying it, leveling it. So the first city he leveled was Moscow, killing millions of people. And Ginny Sparks was like, oh no, fuck that. We're going to figure out who this is and, destroy him. And he has like 1,000 clones that go into each city through like these portals and destroy it. And Ginny's like, no, we're gonna go in there and we're gonna stop this from happening. So the Authority, their base ship in the Authority is called the Carrier. The Carrier is like this interdimensional ship that is actually alive. It's about the size of, it's like way bigger than Texas. It's like 80 miles across, like 80 miles wide, and like 1 billion miles long. And the ship stays within Earth's orbit, but in different dimensions. So there's one dimension called the Bleed. There's another dimension where it travels through. It's never quite outside of Earth's atmosphere in our dimension. So it kind of gives them this Watchtower vibe. If you know DC Justice League, they have, of course, the Hall of Justice, which is, their base for show. Like, so the news is like, oh, the Justice League is meeting at the Hall of Justice. Look at them go. It's the decoy, where the real Hall of Justice is at the Watchtower, which is in orbit of Earth. Where the Watchtower is in orbit of Earth in the Justice League, same thing with the Carrier, except you cannot use a telescope to see the Carrier. The Carrier is like in some weird dimension, chilling, minding its own business. And the Carrier, you're able to open any door. You're allowed to say door, and it'll open a door into whichever city, or a door. If you're in a city, you can say door, and the Carrier will bring you back. So it's a really great, like, interdimensional doorway / hideout for the Authority. And so each member of the Authority has their own powers. Ginny Sparks is the embodiment of the 20th century. That means she has the power of whatever industrial age power there is, kind of. So like, say Ginny Sparks in the 18th century, she would be like, steam powered? And then Ginny Sparks now is very much electrical. Her powers are based on electricity, and she harnesses the power of the 20th century. Jack Hawksmoor can feel and talk to any city he's in, and can basically, the city will tell him how many people are in there, is it being invaded, how it's hurt, where to go. He can literally be the voice of any city. And it's a weird power, but it's actually pretty effective for what they're doing. Midnighter and Apollo are dating. So just imagine Midnighter's Batman and Apollo is Superman. Those are basically their power sets, except Midnighter is genetically modified to be a dope fighter and all that nonsense. And Apollo gets the power from the sun, and he's like God level, basically Superman. And they're like married. So I thought that was kind of cool and funny. So I was like, why don't they make Batman and Superman married? That'd be an interesting, like, what if comic. Anyways, let's not ramble on to that. But yeah, so Midnight and Apollo, that the engineer, she has basically created these nano machines that coat her entire body in metal, and she can fly, she can interface with any machine, she can create guns with her arms. She's basically a molten machine that can mold into anything she wants, kind of like Terminator, like the dudes in Terminator that morph into monsters. She's kind of like that, but not a monster. And then the Doctor can do literally anything. So the Doctor is a title that's handed down to people and who can kind of sympathize with the powers they get. And so the Doctor can literally turn birds into planes or change the material of reality. In one fight, he literally turns the people coming at him fighting, and he turns them all into trees and grows this amazing forest out of their bodies. So the Doctor can morph reality and do whatever he wants. He's basically an Omega level mutant, and I don't know why he needs a team of people, because really he could take care of all this on his own because he can morph reality and do whatever he wants, but that takes away from the comic. Anyways, so in the first volume of The Authority, they're trying to stop the Circle from doing all these city things, and also Jenny Sparks is trying to recreate the Authority. So throughout the book, we meet the new Doctor, we meet the engineer, and then she brings back Midnighter and the Apollo. They all get on the helicarrier, they all get back on the carrier, and they try to stop the Circle from decimating Ceres and branding the Earth into their own image and creating their own super like monarchy type stuff. Let's just get to the story. So I liked the first volume of The Authority. Despite the whole racist caricature of the bad guy, that arc is only like the first arc of this volume. The second arc is basically an alien race comes and tries to destroy the planet, and Jenny Sparks has to fight it, and basically God itself comes back and tries to basically rewrite. God itself comes back and is like, you know what, fuck this, I'm going to destroy everything. So the Authority has to go and, kill God, which is very interesting. But I liked The Authority. I thought the writing was really great, and I enjoyed the art by Bryan Hitch and the inks and the letters and all of that. Paul Neary did the inks, I believe, and I just really enjoyed the story. I thought it was a fun turn on a superhero team. You never really see a superhero team that doesn't rely on their morals. It makes things super quick. Like fighting the Circle, it was basically them trying to figure out where they're going to hit next so they can just decimate them. There were no moral issues with them going in there and murdering everybody to get justice. I found that really interesting, and I liked the play on, what happens if a superhero team just didn't care and did what they had to do and didn't take orders from anyone. Because it's not that the Authority is a superhero team like where they worry about the governments, the world's governments, and everybody. The Authority is literally that. They are the Authority. That means they will go after any government that opposes them. They'll go after any villain that opposes them, and they will make things how they see fit in their image. Now that is wild and hella intense, and they do kind of talk about, like, they have other characters outside the Authority talking about, should they have all this power? Like, what the hell? But it doesn't matter, because with their powers, they can enforce their authority. So it doesn't, like, they basically rule the earth, and if you step out of line, they're going to put you back in your place or kill you. It's wild. I thought it was interesting, and it's actually really interesting in the book, despite the first villain. Now, I liked the first book so much that I was like, oh, I'm going to check out volume 2, which is written by Mike Millar. I don't know how you say his name. I don't really care. Mike Millar, he wrote The Kingsman and all that. I've heard that he's not the best from various, comics writers and creators. So I was like, I'm going to give it a chance. I like the first volume so much. I'm going to check out volume 2, because this review would have been a review on both books, but I couldn't get through volume 2. Mark Millar is racist as hell. like from beginning to end. There is no chill. So I forget her name, the Asian person in the Authority who's like Hawk Woman or Hawk Girl. She's in there, and then at one point she calls herself, in Mark Millar's book, the Oriental with the wings. And I was like, what in the absolute fuck? Who would call themselves that? It was like the Oriental with big boobs and wings. And I was like, I was speechless. And in that moment, I was like, I should really put this book down. But I kept reading because I'm a glutton for punishment, and I just wanted to know, how racist could this get? The answer was very racist, Jazz. This book can get incredibly racist and offensive. Please keep reading. I can't even remotely remember the storyline of the second volume because I was so distracted by just the racist banter. He made the Midnighter racist. The Midnighter, just this random, he's not random, but he's just like this Batman foil who likes to kick ass and loves Apollo. That's it. Now all of a sudden he hates that there's a bunch of refugees living on the carrier, which the carrier is like the size of like half the earth. It doesn't matter if there's a bunch of refugees living on the carrier. It doesn't affect him whatsoever. But he walks through them playing a game of soccer, and he's like, oh, nothing makes me think of how racist I am and how much I hate these people than having them on the carrier, when he walks back into his apartment with Apollo. And I was like, no, I'm just paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly what he said, but that's basically the gist of what he said was, I hate these people basically because they're brown, I guess. I want them off my carrier. Why do we have these refugees still living with us? And I was like, this shit is wild. Why the tone switch? Warren Ellis's book was extremely focused on what the team was doing. So you do get a hint of their personality. Like Jenny Sparks likes to joke around, but she's very serious, and she's very into getting the Authority their power and justice so they're able to take over and do what they need to do to make sure there's world peace. And the Midnighter and Apollo just like kicking ass and dating each other. Hawk Girl likes being Hawk Girl. That's not her name, but you know, she's smart and she's like Ginny's right hand woman. And then the engineer is just having fun figuring out her nanotechnology and just being dope. And the doctor's over there like, look what I can do. I can turn people into trees, boogity boogity boo. And that's really cool too. But all of a sudden, when Mike I'm butchering his name, but I don't care because he's racist. Mike Millar starts writing it, all of a sudden everybody's racist and can't function. Like, everybody's racist and they say terrible things all the time. When they were talking in Warren Ellis's book, it was about justice and kicking ass and figuring out how to, kill God or do whatever they do. And now it's about, damn these refugees, and oh, look at me, I'm Asian and I've got big boobs. And you're like, what? And it just spirals out of control, and I just don't understand why he has to be like this. Like, why? Because it killed my love of the story of the book. Like, yes, Warren Ellis's first villain or mastermind was a racist caricature. I get it. Yeah, I acknowledge it. I'm highly unhappy about it. But that's the only hint of racism, is that weird trope he has in the beginning. This, like, I can't with that. Mike Millar saw that trope and was like, you know what? Let's make the entire second volume about this. Let's make the entire second run of this book about racist shit, and have the story and the struggles of the Authority being the Authority. Let's have that be secondary to all the bullshit. Because then once you start getting into the story, you're like, oh, okay, this is a cool story. I'm starting to get into the vibe of what's going on. Ginny's died. Spoiler alert. and I'm trying to get into the vibe of the team, trying to figure out what to do and all of this stuff. Then boom, somebody says something racist happens, something sexist happens, something completely unnecessary is said, and you're like, what is the point of including this line in this book? I don't understand. Help me understand. So after trying to read volume 2, because I was going to do volume 1 and volume 2 for this review, I was like, you know what? Why am I putting myself through this pain? I have so many other things I could be reading, so many other things I could be sharing with you guys. So I was like, fuck this. And I stopped reading The Authority Volume 2. So I do recommend The Authority Volume 1 by Warren Ellis writing. Make sure Warren Ellis is writing it. Yes, the first villain is a racist caricature. I get it. You can skip the first arc if you want to. I don't know if it's important. Actually, I don't think it's that important. It's just kind of an introduction to the team and how they all got back together and their position with Earth and everything. And you learn like their powers and more about the carrier. So if you want, you can just read like a Wikipedia thing of the first like arc of the first volume and then move on to the next story, because there is no racist caricatures. There's no randomly racist things. It's just a story about the Authority kicking ass, not taking names because they don't care. They literally lay waste to all of their enemies, and it's wild. Especially with the Doctor and Apollo, they have Omega level mutants on their team, and they go ham. It's wild. But do not, I repeat, do not read volume 2, written by by Mark Millar, I don't know. Don't read that one. It's not that great. And you're going to be horribly distracted. Like the minute you start to get into what's going on in the plot, he's going to say something racist or sexist, and it's going to abruptly take you out of the book. And I'm not about that life. It's unnecessary in those moments of dialogue. I don't care when it was written. It's just completely unnecessary, and it ruins the whole vibe of the book. I was very disappointed and sad that Warren Ellis didn't write volume 2, because this, it's garbage. So yes, Authority Volume 1 by Warren Ellis with art by Bryan Hitch and inks by Paul Neary. 10 out of 10, man. Well, actually, I'll give it more of a 8 out of 10 because that racist caricature in the beginning kind of set me back a little bit. But you can skip that first arc. And but Authority Volume 2, straight trash. Don't even spend time reading it. It's not worth it. Also, the characters are written weird and differently, I guess, to angle them to be more racist. I just don't know. Like, I liked the Midnighter in the first one. I fucking hate him in the second one. He's like, I don't know, they just made him like your racist uncle. And I don't know, unnecessary. And then everybody's just really into how, like, all the women are into how busty they are. I've never seen so much dialogue about breast and like foreigners in the same sentence. It's very unsettling, and I hate all the word choices, and I hate how racist it is. So yeah, we're gonna now pretend that volume 2 doesn't exist. So read volume 1 by Warren Ellis. You can skip that first arc. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10 now. I'm gonna give it a good 7 out of 10. It's worth checking out just to see the interesting. It's like if the Justice League went all out and was like, fuck it, we're in charge now. Do what we say or die. And I felt like that was a really interesting premise, so I picked it up, and I say, yeah, it's super interesting. And yeah, this is it for this episode of the Black Bibliophile. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to support the podcast, you can become a Patreon or become a patron on Patreon. On Patreon, I usually have like fun articles. I'm waiting to start the Black Bibliophile book club until we have more members apart. So when I have 4 members, that's when I'll start the book club, and we'll be reading cool books together, and I'll provide questions, and we can have discussions, and it'll be really fun. And none of the books I cover in the Black Bibliophile book club will be covered in the podcast. So it's exclusive. The books we're talking about are exclusive to the book club, which is going to be fun. Also, if you want to contribute to me or the podcast, you can go to my Ko-fi. Everything will be in the show notes below, including the books that I've referenced in this episode. And yeah, thank you guys for listening and hanging out and listening to me rant about this book. It was definitely a wild book to read, and I read it spur of the moment at recommendation, and I really enjoyed Warren Ellis's writing, and I was really horrifically disappointed by Mike. Why do I want to call him Mike, man? His name is Mark. His name is Mark Mylar. He wrote the Kingsman books, which, side note, I will not be reading those after reading that Ark of the Authority. So yeah. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.